Crazy Crab! Let's take a look at all the Yodas we've seen over the years and talk about them. So let's take a look at these. There's four main Yodas we're going to talk about, even though you could probably find a million with all the cartoons, comics, books, spin-offs, toys. But let's just talk about the main films, where you would think we would pretty much have one Yoda, right? I mean, they have a fairly nice budget to work with. It shouldn't be too hard to keep a fairly consistent looking character. So here we have a different species who's originally a puppet, but as far as his appearance, it shouldn't be a big problem with consistency. Now, there is a human behind Yoda, Mr. Frank Oz, who's still with us, always available and willing to help with the voice or even the puppeteering if needed. But despite all that, we don't have consistency. It's hard to explain, and I did some research as to the reasons for this, and it's interesting stuff, and I'll touch on some of it, but the main purpose here is just to look at it from a film viewer's standpoint. Let's just look at these Yodas. I'm going to give my opinions on the different versions of Yoda, what I like and dislike about each. Let's go ahead and get started with Yoda number one.
Very far away in a foreign land.
Okay, the Yoda we all originally knew and loved. I know we're all entitled to our own opinions, but there's one exception. This is the best Yoda, and that's all there is to it. It looks absolutely amazing. Everything that embodies Yoda, wisdom, experience, power, it's all right here. And this wasn't just decided out of nowhere. This Yoda here, original concept art, shows a very different Yoda. There's ideas like a blue Yoda, which, of course, we eventually get anyway. But we'll get to that later. Yoda, who was originally only supposed to appear in Empire Strikes Back, stayed the same in Return of the Jedi because they used the same puppet. Nothing really changed. So he was great throughout the two movies he was in. Awesome. And the reason he returned, by the way, Lucas decided to have him return, probably because a combination of his popularity, but also they felt they needed to confirm to Luke and to the audience that Vader really was his father. So they had Luke ask him, is Vader my father? And he's told him, your father is. So that cleared up that issue. It's kind of like now a lot of people think Kylo Ren lied to Rey about her parents. Back then people thought Vader lied to Luke about him being his father. So Yoda returned, cleared up that issue, no problem. And this is the Yoda of the original trilogy, the original movies. I don't have any criticisms at all. Call me a fanboy, call me what you want. I just don't have any problems with this Yoda. I guess, part of that could be he was the first one. He's the first thing I saw. Got embedded in my mind. He's the most comfortable, the most natural. But I think most people would, even newer fans probably would agree, I think. Even fans of the prequels who like the prequels more than the originals, most of them would probably at least agree this is the most authentic looking, the most convincing portrayal of, a really old and powerful little Jedi whose wisdom is just beyond imagination.
And where you should not. For my ally is the Force. And a powerful ally it is. Life creates it, makes it grow. Its energy surrounds us and binds us. Luminous beings are we, not this crude matter. You must feel the Force around
Okay, seriously, the first time I saw this Yoda, I thought to myself, oh, cool, another Yoda, another species, another one of Yoda's species. We got the girl. And then before I even finished thinking that, I was like, wait a minute, because he was sitting on the Jedi Council. I was like, wait a second. Is that supposed to be Yoda? Like, have you ever seen someone you knew like 30 years, you haven't seen them for like 30 years, and they've gained like 50 pounds, and you see them and you're like, Craig? It's like, what? Something's not right. But he looked funny, Yoda. Whatever it was at the time it was like, okay, there wasn't a side-by-side comparison, so I had to kind of think, well, he's indoors, he's on a Jedi Council, it's a completely different situation, he's not on Dagobah, so maybe it's not as bad as I'm thinking, maybe my eyes are deceiving me, but after seeing the movie more, it became clear it was definitely a different puppet, and it wasn't really that close at all, and it was actually pretty bad. And apparently, George Lucas wanted to make a digital Yoda in the Phantom Menace back when it was being made, but they just couldn't get it right. And so the puppet was kind of rushed. It came out not that great, and that's what they had to use. That's what they went with. So again, I have to believe there was some poor planning, poor execution, and just unfortunate events that led to this Yoda, who was eventually replaced by a CGI Yoda in 2011 on the Blu-ray. And even though CGI is often criticized in Star Wars, by myself included, I actually, in this case, am all for it, and I feel it's an improvement. I heard the reason that he looked so messed up was that Lucas wanted him to look younger, and that's part of the deal. But that doesn't really make sense. Yoda was 900 in the original trilogy, so 870 in the prequels. That's like an 83-year-old man compared to when he was 82. Not that much different. So anyway, well, this was George Lucas's quote regarding the Phantom Menace Yoda situation. He said, "We were trying desperately to get a digital Yoda in the first film, Phantom Menace. We just couldn't make it work. We came close. We got Jar Jar and Sebulba and Watto, a lot of other characters, but we couldn't get Yoda because he was much harder to do. And so when we finally did get that accomplished, before the second film, we went back and put the digital Yoda back in the first film as it was intended to be." Well, everyone makes mistakes. I'm not saying this was the ultimate sin of Star Wars, but I didn't like the puppet. He doesn't look right at all. Eyes look weird. Face wrong shape. Just completely off. Hey, if you wanted to say this was like 600 years ago, well, maybe I'm buying it, but 30? I mean, I'm sure whoever worked on the puppet, they were paid handsomely. I'm sure they were talented. I'm sure if I tried to make a puppet of Yoda, it would be even worse. But I'm not a puppet maker. And also, I can find more convincing Yodas on Halloween every year. Even the cheapest Yoda costume will be better than this. Here's a kid from E.T. dressed as Yoda. I used this photo in a different video for a different purpose, but this Yoda here is much closer than the Phantom Menace Yoda, and I just don't get it. With the time they had, the planning, the preparation, the money, the budget, I know there was a lot to do. George Lucas had a lot on his plate, but you got to prioritize Yoda a little more, in my opinion. Okay, in episodes 2 and 3, and later, as I talked about in episode 1 with the CGI, we get CGI Yoda. Realistically, it's not that great either, but after watching that Phantom Menace Yoda, I was happy they went in this direction, and I actually guess they really needed a CGI Yoda if they were going to have him fight with a lightsaber, which they did. I don't want to criticize the films more than I already do because I didn't really love that, but that's fine. And he looks more like Yoda, he's got the round face. He still looks more than 30 years younger, but it's okay. I mean, how much can I complain? It's such a big improvement over the Phantom Menace. He fits into the prequels nicely, since he's surrounded by CGI. He must feel right at home. Just CGI everywhere. They could have tried to make a new puppet again and just use the CGI for the fight, but after that first puppet, maybe they made the right decision. Even Frank Oz wasn't too upset about it. He thought George did what was necessary. He says, as a filmmaker, George needed to tell a particular story, and this story that he needed to tell was a big fight with Yoda. And he could not do that with a puppet. It was impossible, so he had the choice to either dump the story or stay with the story, which he felt strongly about, or change Yoda. So he did what any storyteller would do. Fair enough. CGI puppet, it's an improvement, a little video game-ish, but you know what? I can deal with it. I still miss the original, but then a big surprise in The Last Jedi really caught me off guard. Okay, we knew it was possible, but I didn't really expect it. I didn't expect Yoda or too many other characters to come back. I'm not a big fan of shoving characters in our faces that don't belong, but Yoda, Force Ghost, came back to talk to Luke. I didn't find it terribly out of place. Yoda appears as a Force Ghost, and when we see him, it's pretty cool. And he looks closer to the original Yoda. And that's the look they were going for, and I have to say I appreciate that. At the time, When I saw it, I thought it was a CGI attempt to recreate the original. But Rian Johnson, who directed The Last Jedi, he's been quoted as saying, Frank Oz came back and puppeteered it from a hole underneath the set and doing the voice. It was just like we were back in the early 80s. Now that's some sweetness right there. That's awesome. So nice job, Rian Johnson. You're not a total failure. So I appreciate that you went for that. He was a Force ghost, so they needed to do some computer work to give him that little blue glow. And he kind of looked like squashed or something. Not quite perfect. It was a little off, but much, 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 much better than the Phantom Menace puppet. And apparently they found an original mold. They meticulously recreated Yoda, and they did a great job. Like I said, maybe not perfect, but it was close. I'm just talking about his appearance. And the voice, of course, the voice was perfect because Frank Oz came back. I'm not talking about the actual scene and his lines and all that because I need to watch it again to really have a better opinion. I know I didn't like that a Force ghost can cause lightning to actually damage real life things. Like, if that's the case, we could always use some Force ghosts to show up during lightsaber battles. Like, say, Kylo and Rey are going at it with lightsabers. Yoda can just show up. You know, he'll just, Yoda,
Kylo Ren hit you about the lightning I did. Unfortunate.
but it's like, whatever. We're just talking about visually. How did the Yodas look? Well, my ranking, pretty obvious. You already know. A lot of people will agree. There's some who actually prefer the Phantom Menace puppet over CGI. I understand because I typically would prefer a puppet too, but in this case, I'm going CGI over that thing. So my ranking is number 1, the original puppet. Number 2, the Last Jedi Force Ghost. Number 3, the prequel CGI model. And number 4, this horrific thing. So thanks so much, guys. I'm Crazy Crab. Please share this video with others. Like, subscribe. Y'all are the best. Crazy Crab, gone.